August 16, 1940. 20,000 feet over the English coast. Flight Lieutenant James Nicholson has a German Messerschmitt Bf 109 in his sights. He shoves the throttle of his Hawker Hurricane as far as it will go, the engine screaming in protest. The German fighter has just finished its bombing escort run, and Nicholson knows he has less than 30 seconds to close the gap. But the Bf-19 pilot sees him. A quick glance back, and then the inevitable. The German simply opens his throttle. The gap widens. 50 yards becomes 100, then 200. Nicholson's airspeed indicator is maxed out at 290 miles per hour. It's everything his Hurricane can give. But the Messerschmitt is already doing 320, maybe more, and it just vanishes into the distance. Another one got away. This wasn't a one-off. This was the brutal reality for Hurricane pilots every single day during the summer of 1940. They were climbing into their cockpits, knowing full well that if a Bf-19 decided to run, they had almost zero chance of catching it. The numbers were stark and unforgiving. At 15,000 feet, the Messerschmitt Bf 109 Emil could hit 342 miles per hour in level flight. The Hurricane Mark I, on a good day with the wind at its back, maybe 316. That 26 mile per hour difference wasn't just a number on a spec sheet. It was a death sentence. It gave German pilots complete tactical control. They chose when to fight and, more importantly, when to disengage, leaving the Hurricanes chasing ghosts. Squadron commanders were at their wits' end. Their flight reports from July and August read like a diary of despair. Pursued enemy aircraft for 2 minutes before he drew out of range. Closed to 400 yards but could not decrease distance further. Enemy aircraft dived away and I was unable to follow effectively. The frustration was palpable. It wasn't the pilots. British pilots were exceptionally trained, undeniably brave, and tactically sound, but they were fighting a battle of physics they couldn't win. Their aircraft simply wasn't fast enough. Now, you might be thinking, what about the Spitfire? The iconic Supermarine Spitfire was indeed faster, capable of around 362 miles per hour. But in August 1940, Fighter Command had fewer than 300 of them ready for action. In contrast, they had nearly 600 Hurricanes. The Hurricane was the backbone of the RAF, the workhorse destined to shoot down more enemy aircraft than all other defences combined. But in those crucial summer weeks, it was being asked to do the impossible. The casualties were mounting. It wasn't just about being shot down, though that was happening far too often. The real killer was positional disadvantage. When you can't catch an enemy, you can't dictate the terms of the fight. German pilots could perform hit-and-run attacks, diving on hurricane formations, firing a quick burst, and then using their superior speed to escape before the British could even react. The Hurricanes were constantly on the back foot, forced into a defensive posture. By mid-August, the strain was beginning to show. Morale in the hurricane squadrons was taking a nosedive. Pilots started to feel like they were flying obsolete machines against a technologically superior foe. Whispers filled the mess halls. How could they possibly win this battle when their main fighter couldn't even catch the opposition? The Air Ministry knew, the pilots knew, the ground crews knew, everyone knew the hurricane was too slow, and it seemed like there was absolutely nothing anyone could do about it, except ... there was. A solution was coming, and it would emerge from the most unlikely place imaginable. A small group of flight sergeants, a few wrenches, and an idea that was completely, utterly forbidden. They were about to take matters into their own hands and change the course of the air war. Picture this: summer 1940, the Battle of Britain rages in the skies over England. On the ground, amidst the scent of oil and high-octane fuel, every RAF ground crew member faces a silent, maddening dilemma every single day. It's a problem that sits right in front of them, spinning at over 2,000 revolutions per minute. The hurricane's propeller, that massive three-bladed de Havilland or Rotal constant speed propeller, was a masterpiece. 11 feet in diameter, it could automatically adjust the angle of its blades to keep the engine speed just right. Whether the aircraft was climbing or diving, a true feat of engineering, but deep inside its complex gut, it held a fatal limitation. And everyone, from the greenest rookie to the most grizzled flight sergeant, knew exactly what it was. The system used in most Hurricane Mark was hydraulic. It changed the propeller's pitch, a fine, steep angle for takeoff and climbing, and a coarse, flat angle for high-speed level flight. Think of it like the gears on a bicycle. Fine pitch is your low gear, great for accelerating and getting up a hill, but you'll be spinning your legs like crazy and not going very fast on a flat road. Coarse pitch is your high gear, awful for starting out, but essential if you want to reach top speed. The system worked flawlessly, but there was a catch. Its limits were set back in 1938, during peacetime. Back then, squeezing every last mile per hour out of the aircraft wasn't a matter of life or death. So the propeller had physical stops built into its little metal pins and collars inside the hub that prevented the blades from rotating beyond a certain angle. This was to stop the propeller from spinning too fast and putting too much stress on the engine. It was a safety feature. The problem was, this safety feature was making the Hurricane slow. Engineering officers understood the aerodynamics. They knew that at altitude you wanted the coarsest pitch possible, the flattest blade angle to slice through the thin air. The Hurricane's propeller stops were set conservatively. They were safe, yes, but they were also a speed brake in the smoky crew rooms. Flight sergeants like Harold Bunny Roos of No. 17 Squadron and Bill Minns from No. 32 Squadron were scribbling calculations on the backs of cigarette packets. Their math was simple but profound. If they could just increase that maximum course pitch stop by a mere 3 or 4 degrees, it would allow the blades to bite into the air at a flatter, more efficient angle. This would slash propeller drag. Less drag meant more speed. How much more? Maybe 10 miles per hour, maybe 15. If you were feeling optimistic, maybe even 20. 20 miles per hour, that was enough. Enough for a hurricane to finally catch a Messerschmitt Bf 109 in a dive. Enough to turn the tables. Enough to save lives. But there was a brick wall in their way, made of paper and ink. Air Ministry regulations. Unauthorized modifications to aircraft systems were absolutely, unequivocally forbidden. Air Publication 129, The Bible of RAF Maintenance, was crystal clear. Any change to engine or propeller settings needed written authorization from the top brass, a process that could take 6 months, if not longer. 6 months they simply didn't have in peacetime. The logic was sound. You couldn't have squadrons all over the country tinkering with critical systems based on hunches. It would be chaos. The de Havilland Company had set those propeller limits after extensive testing. To move them was to operate outside the known safe flight envelope. It could overstress the hub. It might create dangerous vibrations. It could, in a worst-case scenario, lead to a catastrophic failure, sending a propeller blade tearing through the cockpit at high speed. It was a terrifying gamble. Or ... it might work perfectly and save dozens of pilots. So the flight sergeants would stand under the broad wings of the Hurricanes during inspections, staring at those propeller hubs. They knew that inside was a simple mechanical stop. A stop that could be adjusted in about 45 minutes with a few basic tools. 45 minutes of work that was completely, utterly, career-endingly against the rules. They stood there day after day, looking at the planes their pilots would fly into combat. They knew how to make them faster. They knew how to give their boys a better chance. And they were forbidden to do it. So they did nothing. They followed the rules. They watched their pilots fly off, knowing they could be doing more. Until one day they just couldn't stand doing nothing anymore. The story of what happened next is one of ingenuity, courage, and breaking the rules for the right reasons. It est a testament to the people on the ground who were just as vital to winning the war as the August 22nd, 1940. Midnight. The air at Martlesham Heath is thick with the scent of high-octane fuel and exhaustion. Flight Sergeant James Fitter stands on the dispersal, the darkness hiding the grim set of his jaw. He's just watched 2 more pilots return, their faces etched with the same bitter story. Got close, one had said, his voice raw. Jerry opened the throttle, and I just couldn't catch him. One of those pilots was just a boy, barely 20 years old, and only 3 weeks with number 17 Squadron. As he climbed out of his Hurricane, his hands trembled. It wasn't fear, not really. It was pure, unadulterated frustration. The impotent rage of a hunter who can see his prey but is always, infuriatingly, 1 step too slow. The German Messerschmitt Bf 109s were proving just a little too fast. For the pilots of Fighter Command, a few miles per hour was the difference between a kill and an empty fuel tank. It was the difference between coming home and not. Fitter had seen enough. Tonight, something had to change. With a toolbox in one hand and a torch in the other, he walked purposefully towards Hurricane L1842, its silhouette a familiar, comforting shape against the moonlit clouds. He knew what he was about to do was completely illegal, a direct violation of Air Ministry regulations. It could get him court-martialed, stripped of his rank, and thrown in a military prison. But he also knew something had to be done. The book wasn't winning this war. Maybe it was time to write a new chapter. The modification itself wasn't rocket science. Not if you knew your way around a de Havilland constant-speed propeller, and Fitter had been working on them since 1937. He was an artist, and this was his canvas. First, he removed the large spinner dome that covered the propeller hub. 8 simple screws, easy enough. Beneath it lay the heart of the machine, the pitch change mechanism. This intricate piece of engineering allowed the pilot to adjust the angle of the propeller blades for optimal performance at different speeds and altitudes. Inside this hub was the key, a small, unassuming metal pin, no bigger than his thumbnail. This tiny component acted as a physical stop, a gatekeeper that prevented the propeller blades from rotating past their maximum course pitch. The factory setting was rigid, limiting the blade angle to a conservative 23 degrees. It was a safety measure designed by engineers in a clean room. Far from the life or death duels being fought at 20,000 feet, Fitter knew that a finer pitch gave you better acceleration and climb, but a coarser pitch gave you a higher top speed. The problem was, the factory course setting wasn't coarse enough. He carefully removed the stop collar containing the pin. Walking briskly to the squadron workshop, he secured the collar in a vise. The rasp of the metal file was the only sound in the dead of night. He filed down the stop pin by roughly 3 millimeters. It was a tiny adjustment, almost invisible, but he knew it would change everything. With the precision of a surgeon, he reassembled the propeller hub, ensuring every seal was perfect, every gear was clean, no stray metal filings, no trace of his work. The entire operation took just 47 minutes. When he finished, the propeller blades on Hurricane L1842 could rotate to approximately 26 degrees in course pitch 3 degrees flatter than the designers had ever intended. 3 degrees, that might just be enough. Dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of orange and grey. Fitter found the pilot assigned to L1842, a seasoned flying officer named Peter D. There was no point in lying. Fitter explained exactly what he had done. The choice was now Peter's. He could report the unauthorized modification, and Fitter would face the consequences. Or he could take the Hurricane up and see if the crazy flight sergeant was a genius or a fool. Peter didn't hesitate. He chose the sky. He climbed to 15,000 feet, the familiar rumble of the Merlin engine a steady companion. He leveled off, pushed the throttle to the gate, and braced himself. He watched the airspeed indicator, his heart pounding. The needle climbed. 300 miles per hour. Then 310, 315, 320. It kept climbing. He held his breath as the needle finally settled, rock steady, at 328 miles per hour. A full 12 miles per hour faster than his usual machine. He wanted to shout, to whoop in celebration over the radio, but he caught himself. That would be an admission of guilt, hard evidence of Fitter's crime. He brought the modified Hurricane down, taxiing back to the dispersal, carefully schooling his features into a neutral mask. He couldn't let anyone see the triumphant grin fighting to break free. He climbed out, walked calmly over to Fitter, who was waiting, pretending to check a tire pressure. Peter leaned in and spoke quietly, his voice low and urgent. At 12 miles per hour faster than my usual kite, straight and level at 15,000 feet. He paused, looking Fitter dead in the eye. Engine temperature normal, no vibration, no abnormal sounds. Then he gave the order that would change the course of the air war for number 17 Squadron. Do the rest of them that night, secrecy became their shield. Fitter and 2 other trusted flight sergeants, sworn to silence, turned the dispersal into a clandestine workshop. Under the cover of darkness, they moved from one hurricane to the next. The process was now a well-oiled machine. Spinner off, collar out, file down the pin, reassemble, check, and double-check. Each aircraft took about 45 minutes. By the time the sun rose on August 23rd, 7 illegally modified fighters sat on the hard standing at Martlesham Heath. To any observer, they were identical to every other Hurricane in fighter command, but they were hiding a secret. They were sleepers, capable of speeds that the official test pilots at the Royal Aircraft Establishment would have sworn were impossible. The real test, the only one that mattered, came 2 days later. Flight Lieutenant Gordon Sinclair, a hardened veteran, was on patrol when he spotted a lone Bf-109 that had just strafed a convoy off the coast of Harwich. The German pilot saw the hurricane closing in and did what he always did. He pushed his throttle forward, expecting to leave the British fighter behind in a slipstream of contempt. But this time was different. The hurricane didn't fall back. It stayed right on his tail, a relentless shadow. Sinclair watched the distance shrink. 600 yards, 400, 300. The German pilot must have been in disbelief, hammering his controls, wondering why his superior machine wasn't pulling away. At 200 yards, Sinclair had him perfectly lined up. At 150 yards, he squeezed the firing button. 8 Browning machine guns roared to life, and a torrent of 303 rounds tore into the mesquite. The 109 faltered, then plunged towards the North Sea, a comet of smoke and leaking glycol. Sinclair returned to Martlesham Heath, his mind racing. He shut down his engine, the silence deafening after the roar of combat. The first thing he did after climbing out of the cockpit was ask for one man by name. "Get me Flight Sergeant Fitter." When Fitter arrived, his face a mask of anxious professionalism, Sinclair didn't waste words. He didn't smile. He simply looked at the man who had risked everything and said, "Whatever you did to my aircraft, it works." He then asked the question that would arm his entire squadron with a new, illegal, and life-saving advantage. How many others have you done? In the desperate summer of 1940, with the fate of a nation hanging in the balance, victory was measured in miles per hour, and it was won not just by the pilots in the sky, but by the quiet, ingenious, and defiant heroes on the ground. Thank you so much for watching. This incredible story is a testament to the ingenuity and courage that defined the era. If you enjoyed this piece of hidden history, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more stories just like this one. We'll see you in the next video.